Myself and hopefully you podcast. My name is Tariq, a 19-year-old university student currently experiencing a midlife crisis. Why, you might ask? Because I have no idea what I want to do with my life. So rather than see a therapist, I decided to start a podcast where I interview guests from an array of backgrounds and have a chat about more about them. And hopefully, by learning about them, I can learn a bit more about what I want to do with myself too and create my own little story. So if you're interested, or maybe you just want to see where I end up, then make sure you subscribe so you don't miss every new podcast episode released every Sunday right here on the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You YouTube channel, or on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. This week, another sort of more casual episode, but a great episode nonetheless. I sit down with Nicole, who has had a very interesting life. And we get more into that and about what it was like for her dad to get cancer and then for her mum to get cancer, why she was inspired to write a book, and so much more. It was a great chat. We talk about sort of her growing up in America and what that was like, and just an overall great conversation. So without further ado, my guest at this time, Nicole Spillner. So, Nicole, I just want to start off asking you some quick fire questions, just to get to know you a bit more. My first question, it's a bit of a random one. What's the last picture on your camera roll?
My last picture of my camera roll is actually of the PG Paints Arena, which is the hockey arena that the Pittsburgh Penguins play. And I was just there last week at a hockey game.
Oh, okay. Well, so do you support the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Mm-hmm.
Did they win?
What was the question?
Did they win?
No, unfortunately they lost, but it was still a good game to go to, nonetheless.
Oh, fair enough. I'm fascinated by American sports because Americans are usually the only ones who play American sports. And I really want to just understand. I just want to watch them. Everyone gets so passionate about it. It's like, I don't know. They just look so fun. There's the NHL, the NFL, the NBA. And I don't know. I'm so fascinated by them, and especially college sports. Maybe we'll get into that later on when we start talking about your experiences at JCU. But I just find them so interesting. Like the way Americans are so passionate about sports. I think, yeah, it's just fascinating. Like I said. My next quickfire question is: who would you consider as your role model in life?
My role model has to be my mom, for sure.
Why is that?
I don't know, like I've just always, she's been more than just a mom to me. She's been just kind of my rock. She's been, the glue to our family. I kind of view her even just like as a best friend. And I grew up, I only have a brother, so I even kind of viewed her as kind of like just like a sisterly, like just another like woman to talk to in my family. But yeah, she sacrificed so much for us over the years, and like I just look up to her every single moment of every day.
Oh, wow. Oh, again, another thing that hopefully we'll get into later on as well, and sort of the impact your mum had on your life, and why you consider her as sort of rock and the glue to your family. My final question is, or final quickfire question is, if there was a house fire and everyone survived, everyone made it outside, but you could only keep one thing, right? So you've got your phone, you've got your laptop, because everyone has their phone and laptop on them most of the time. What would you keep or bring out with you?
I would probably keep, so I write, for the last 16 years, I've been writing weekly handwritten letters to my grandmother on my dad's side. So we've been kind of pen pals for like 15, 16 years. And I just have about 3 or 4 boxes of just filled with letters. And it contains everything from like moments of just every day to even she shared with me bits and pieces of our family history. So I just kind of feel like, I would just kind of take those like as record and just keep them with me.
Oh, wow. That's probably one of the most sentimental answers I've got. I want to know more about that actually. So your grandma, where does she live?
So my grandmother, which is my dad's mom, she lives in the upper Pennsylvania region, kind of close to Pittsburgh, but not a little further away. But my grandfather passed away when I was very young. So she's been kind of, widowed and alone for over 20 years now. And just at such a young age, I didn't understand death, but I felt really bad for her. So I ended up like, when I was like 6 or 7, like sending her like a little card. And she was like blown away by it. And then she kind of reciprocated the action. So for like 16 years, we've just been writing like handwritten letters, just everything about our day to day. You know, she'll share like an inspirational quote. She might occasionally slip like $1 or two in there, you know, over the
That's
years.
what you
But it's
want.
just like,
That's what you want.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a very nice perk. But yeah, we just kind of got into this routine. Like 1 week I send a letter, the next week I receive one, and we've been continuing it to this very day. I just got one last week. So it's like, it's just something that like it's always brightens my week when I know when I get one, and she'll always call me when she receives one. But definitely that was kind of like the kickstart to my writing career, I guess, was just writing handwritten letters.
So have you kept them all, or are there a few
Oh
missing
yeah.
pieces? You kept
I
all of
have
them?
kept them all. Yes. There's like about 3 or 4 boxes of them.
Wow. So do you sometimes like what did the first ever one say?
The first ever one was like, it was very short and brief. But it was kind of just something on like, you know, like received your letter, and like, I drew a picture for her, and she had like on her fridge when I was younger, and she was like, you absolutely made my day, week, month, year. And she kind of just said like, hope kindergarten's going well, like I'll see you soon. Like it was very brief, but like, but as time went on, I mean, there ended up being like a few, even that I sent, that were like 2 or 3 pages just of like, writing about what happened in my week or anything. So, but yeah, I've kept every single card, letter, or even like newspaper article she's ever sent me, because more often than not, like it's either very like personal to me, or it's kind of like all about like my father's side of the family. Which is really cool, because it's just that, I know more about my mom's side than my dad's. So I think that's kind of cool that I have like a bit of history on my dad's side that I get to hold on to.
Oh, I mean, that's really sweet. And you know what I love about that? I love the fact that even though technology has moved on, and you could literally just email each other, you still send, and she could just send you the newspaper article online, but she still sends you like the physical copies of everything, and you can keep it. I love that. I love hearing that. And it's so nice to hear someone that has a really good relationship, such a good relationship with their grandparents, where they're in constant communication.
Mhm.
What would you say is the sort of, what's the I don't know how to phrase this. What's like the most important letter that you've, or the letter that's had the biggest impact on you at that particular time?
Oh gosh. I think one of my favorite letters was actually recently. So when I published my book in December, I kind of shared with my family June of last year, so like 6 months before it was officially published, that like, oh, by the way, like I'm writing this book. And I told my grandmother, and I felt like I was so nervous to tell my grandmother, because not that like she wouldn't love it, but I just feel like she would be like so overjoyed. She might have like a heart attack or something. But when I told her, I mean, I could just tell on the phone, she was just like overwhelmed with like tears and stuff like that. And I ended up getting this letter not even like 2 days later. And it was just like, it kind of was like, I always known she like was proud of me and loved me, but just the way she poured it out into a letter, and she just, was so excited. And she told everyone in her small town that oh, my granddaughter, like she's writing a book, like I can't wait to read it. Just seeing like the pride and joy, like, through her words, and even just through her voice, like on the phone, was like, I mean, that was probably like the first time I actually like in a while like cried about like, wow, like this book is really going to like make a difference, like not just in anyone's life, but also in my family's life. And because she's in it, she's in my book a couple times. And I think so, yeah, recently, it just in the last 6 months, when I received that letter, I was just blown away, and it just kind of, I couldn't help but just cry for just tears of joy and overwhelmed.
Yeah, I bet. So I mean, you mentioned the book there. Could you sort of explain? Well, could you sort of for people that don't know who you are, could you sort of describe little bit about yourself?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. So I actually am born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I've kind of lived here my whole life. And but after I graduated from high school, I actually went off to John Carroll University, which is a small private Jesuit university on the east side of Cleveland. So I went there for 4 years and graduated just in May of 2019, so just 2 years ago, with a double major of human resources and management, and came back to Pittsburgh. And, right now, currently, I, work in kind of recruiting for a big global bank in downtown Pittsburgh. But I also, that's what I kind of do during the day. That's my passion during the day is human resources. But then, on my own free time, I'm very active in my community. I love to spend a lot of time with my family and friends. Love kind of, being kind of like a tourist in my own hometown of Pittsburgh. But I also love to write. Writing has just always been an intrinsic part of my identity. Everywhere from writing handwritten letters to just journaling on my own, and just actually like enjoying English is like my favorite subject in school. But writing to me, at least a part of my life, has actually got me through some of the most challenging chapters of my life. And that's kind of like what I share a little bit more in my book about, is kind of really 3 intense moments in my life that really caused me to kind of pause, reflect, and also trying to find that light at the end of the tunnel.
Do you sort of sometimes feel like writing, like so when I started this podcast, I was starting struggling a little bit mentally, probably, actually maybe not the most I've ever struggled, but I was struggling quite a lot with lockdown and COVID, and it was first year university, it wasn't going the best. And I remember I started this podcast, it was just essentially just to rant and just be able to get things off my chest. Do you feel like sometimes writing enables you to sort of get it from inside you and just be able to put it on? Because for me, it was like when I hit record on those videos, I would just splurge out everything. And then the minute I clicked, finish recording, it's like it didn't all go away, but it did feel like a huge burden was being lifted off my shoulders, and I could just put it in this video and almost just put it out there.
100%. Yes, that exactly. Yes, that's typical. Like I like, even a good example is like this, actually, like about a week or so ago, I kind of had a kind of a very bizarre moment that happened to me. And it was, although I love to talk, like I've done several speaking events. I just love being able to be a storyteller. And however, though, like, to be honest, I do prefer writing over speaking. And it just kind of helps me to digest not even just like what happened, but also just record the moments. But it also allows me to kind of look at it kind of in this masterpiece kind of format, like as a work of art, and really kind of see it as this collective piece. And like, I know for me, this event, like, regardless whether it was this past weekend that I experienced something, or through the 3 traumatic events that I share in my book, it's weird. Like, although I kind of view any challenge in my life, I view it as transformative regardless. I don't try to have a negative perspective on it. I try to view it as like, this is kind of meant to be, or like, this is trying to teach me something. But when I write everything down, it kind of just feels like the weight in my heart's less. My mind is clear. It just kind of puts me at such an ease, and allows me to also appreciate my life, no matter how many challenges or triumphs that I've had. It allows me to really see my life in a whole new light, to be honest.
Yeah, like I feel like it's becoming a bit more common, like journaling and stuff, and bullet journaling or whatever. And I've tried that, to be fair, and it wasn't for me. I prefer, you prefer writing. I prefer just speaking. Not I don't have any sort of hatred towards writing. I have enjoyed writing. I did, somewhat enjoy English in school. I just prefer speaking. I feel like it's easier. My hand doesn't hurt afterwards. And usually I have so much to say, as you probably noticed, because I'll end up rambling on for God knows how many minutes. I have so much to say that my hand is literally falling off by the time I finish. So for me, it's easier just to speak away. But the negative is during Ramadan, like it is right now, when I'm fasting and I'm rambling on, I get very thirsty, and I'm already, feeling it in my mouth, that my mouth is getting very dry. So I probably won't ramble on as much as normal. But anyway, see, I don't even know what point I was trying to make there, because I just ended up talking absolute rubbish. My point is that journaling is becoming a lot more common. And one of the things they sort of say about journaling is one of the things you should do, especially in the morning, is if you sit down and think, write down 3 things you're grateful for, something like that. And even though I don't write them down, there are, many times throughout the day, especially during lockdown, where I've sort of gone, well, at least this, or well, at least this, and I've got this, I've got an opportunity to study or be at university. I've got, this to look forward to. I've got that to look forward to. It's always been sort of a thing that helps you mentally. And I'd advise anyone that's listening that, even if you're not struggling right now, if you're struggling in the future, is if you just don't downplay your own, struggles, talk about them or whatever, but also think about the good things that are about to happen, because just like happiness is temporary, sadness is also temporary. Like it'll come and go, and it'll go up and down, and I'm sure you'll be able to talk about it as well with your life experiences. But life is all about ups and downs, and yeah, that's just sort of my sort of perspective on things, I guess, and on writing.
Love it.
So I want to sort of go slightly to the beginning and to you sort of growing up in Pittsburgh, like you said. Now, I don't know America. I'm assuming it's in Cleveland because you mentioned the word Cleveland. Is that right? Yeah, yes. I don't know anything about America. I'll probably make loads of mistakes. So it's in Cleveland. What's it like growing up in Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh is by far, I could be very biased, but Pittsburgh is a wonderful city. It's so neighborly. It's just this very it's so community oriented. And because we're not as big as New York or Chicago, but we're not like kind of the small town, we're on the map, and I think but it's like a city large enough that it's obviously considered to be, has a huge population, but it still kind of has its just unique features that makes it so homey and so welcoming. Growing up where I grew up in Pittsburgh I kind of grew up in a bubble. And like what I mean by that is I kind of grew up in a community that was, although very grateful to have lived in that community, to have a phenomenal education, it kind of wasn't what the real world was like. I mentioned it in my book, but it was like, a lot of families, lived in like these like mansion-sized homes. Like girls were wearing like Calvin Klein and wearing like Michael Kors like purses as their backpacks, and also like situations like kind of like what I was going through with my family were like kind of like unheard of. And it kind of basically growing up, it kind of overprotected me too much in a way. Which was good, but also, going off to college and, being burdened kind of what I was dealing with my family, it kind of was not healthy for me. And I really had to like burst that bubble growing up. But to be honest though, although kind of at least in my community, that was kind of a little bit of a minor struggle, at least internally on my end, the city of Pittsburgh though has done so much for me. Indirectly, like I'll give a really good example. So my dad, the main setback our first initial derailment was my dad was diagnosed with a rare cancer, which is called O-factor neuroblastoma. It is an extremely rare cancer that there's only been about 10 to 12 cases known of this particular cancer. And wow. He's believed to be one of the longest survivors of it. And at the time, and kind of even still today, there was only like one doctor, because this took place in 2012. And there was really only one doctor who was even willing to like walk with us into the unknown, because there was nothing known about this cancer. We had no idea what the surgery was going to be like, what the long-term, short-term effects were going to be. We had no idea how much time my dad left. But there was only one doctor willing to kind of perform the surgery and walk with us into the unknown. And they happened to be, of all places, in Pittsburgh at the UPMC Presbyterian Hospital, which is kind of crazy. But, basically the city of Pittsburgh kind of like in a very indirect way saved my family, not just once, but twice. Also with my mom as well, who was diagnosed with cancer about 2 years ago as well. So I've had, and also just in general, like the city of Pittsburgh has just been one, although I loved my John Carroll experience and being in Cleveland, when I went off to school, like I just felt like this missing part of me. And every single time I came back to Pittsburgh, whether it was for like a spring break or, summer vacation, or even just came back post grad, like that hole automatically was filled when I came back to Pittsburgh. And yeah, there's just so much that Pittsburgh has to offer, that has offered me and has still yet to give me, that I, as of right now, have no intentions of ever leaving.
So yeah, so I mean, it definitely does sound like, especially with the situation with your dad and how the only doctor that seems to be is that wanted to actually help or could help was miraculously in Pittsburgh as well. Because he could have been anywhere in the world, and he was in Pittsburgh, which is amazing. What you mentioned, sort of Pittsburgh sort of offers you something that no other place has offered you, and when you leave it, it leaves a hole in your heart. What is that? What would you say is that thing, that hole?
I would say it's very hard to describe, but I think it's probably one of the very few places where I felt authentically myself. And in my book, I talk about how truly Pittsburgh mirrors the landscape, driving through Pittsburgh, which is an insane challenge in itself. The whole experience of getting to Pittsburgh and navigating through the downtown and city life really does mirror life's twists and turns, the ups and downs that life has to offer. And I think I would just say there's just this feeling of just overjoy, like when I just walked downtown, when I was going to work, before obviously everything was remote and everything like that. There was just this feeling of like calmness, tranquility, but also just like I was like at peace with myself. Like it was kind of like, it was like there was just this moment or opportunity where it's like, I kind of, everything of my life, both good and kind of challenging, kind of just disappeared for a minute. And I just was like, just in this present moment. And I mean, there's nothing in Pittsburgh that I've ever done has disappointed me either. And I had the opportunity, even with just the given past year of things, I've had the opportunity to, meet people, new people in the area, but also like explore sections that I've never been to. And I lived here my whole life. So it's kind of like interesting how, kind of like life itself, like, and kind of like me, like I'm still learning about myself. And like, there's so much, there's so many more secrets, so many different, locations or places to visit in Pittsburgh that's just like kind of waiting to explore and to see. So I just kind of see it as like a mirror of my life, to be honest, just how Pittsburgh is.
I can definitely relate to that sort of that last point there when you sort of said how you're still exploring new things even though you've lived there. I'm from like a small town, so I'm going to assume, because since Pittsburgh is a city, is a lot bigger than where I'm from. But I'm sometimes like, especially when lockdown started, I started going for walks, and I was like, whoa, what's this? And I didn't even know this existed. And these amazing sort of little areas, and most people listening are from that area that I'm from. It's tiny, and they're probably thinking, what are you on about, Tariq? But as someone that sort of didn't really explore when I was younger, when I went out to just walk, I was walking up these. I don't know in Pittsburgh, but in where I'm from, it's like very hilly, so there's loads of hills and they're quite high. So like when you reach the top, it's like a long climb top. Your legs are hurting and you're tired and you're thirsty. But when you get to the top and you can see the whole valley right across, it's the most beautiful thing. And it's like you're there, and it's like almost a little Zen moment. You're like in the moment, and you just breathe it all in. It's the most beautiful thing ever. So I can definitely relate to that sort of point, and how sort of Pittsburgh almost represents or reflects your own life. Because whilst I explored new parts of where I'm from, when I look back at it now over the last sort of year or so, I also discovered new parts of myself where I grew in self-confidence. Because I was always quite a confident person, and I've said this quite a few times on the podcast. Actually, I've always been quite a confident person, but I believe that there's a difference between being confident and being self-confident. So I could be confident in the sense that I can stand up in front of, if you give me 1,500 people, I'll stand up in front of them and have a impromptu conversation. I can do it. I can speak, right? As you can probably tell, I can just ramble on and chat a load of rubbish for, minutes upon minutes, right? But but I was never self-confident. I never truly believed in myself. And to be fair, I never really liked being alone by myself, because when I was alone by myself, I was alone with my thoughts. And it was never making me happy. And it was whilst I was exploring over the last year or so that I was questioning myself, and I was going this, and I developed myself so much. So I can definitely relate to that sort of the point that you were making there. I want to slightly still touch on sort of Pittsburgh, because you mentioned how you were growing up, and all these people had the Michael Kors bags and whatever, and they were really fancy. I'm not gonna lie, I really want to go now since there's all this fancy stuff. I can't lie, and it sounds great the way you're describing it. So I'm assuming that Pittsburgh is sort of a wealthy area, and you had a pretty good sort of upbringing in the financial sense of things.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh is there's a very unique layout to Pittsburgh, where, I mean, you have the central downtown, but then you have two main areas. You have the North Hills and you have the South Hills. The South Hills is where I grew up. And to be honest, like the South Hills and the North Hills, we kind of like, it's weird. It's like, if you're from the South Hills, you never go to the North Hills, and vice versa. It's interesting, I was gonna say, throughout high school, I mean, I got to go and play different teams because I played lacrosse and like field hockey. Other than that, it's like you never explored like either side. And which is a shame, to be honest, because like both sides are very beautiful. But yeah, I mean, overall in general, there's several towns and kind of like suburbs that are very on the wealthier side. And yeah, like in terms of, I think even just taking it a little more deeper, like even just besides obviously the suburb that I grew up in, I mean, my family upbringing was, I think, very like middle class, to be honest. I mean, I think that's kind of what I really appreciated about my family, at least, and growing up. Like, we kind of didn't follow the norm, or like it was just like we didn't fall into that typical stereotype of like our town. I mean, we were very financially secure, and I felt like I had probably the best upbringing I could ever have, to be honest. And I wouldn't change really anything about it. But it was interesting just to kind of see, even in my town that was very overall pretty wealthy. I mean, you did kind of see both extremes. You saw, there was someone in high school that lived in like a $5 billion like mansion, but then there was like someone that lived in like a tiny apartment with like 3 other siblings. So it's just, you kind of got very extremes even in my own suburb. But I feel though, overall though, at least in terms of my just immediate family, it was kind of overall fantastic upbringing. And I think it was, in a weird way, like, I'm not one to follow, typically follow trends and stuff like that. I'm not one to kind of like, succumb to peer pressure. Okay, hey, everybody else is doing this, that means like I need to do it too. It really just kind of helped me in a way be more authentic to who I am. And that goes the same with me and my brother. I think my brother and I kind of did a really good job, just based off on upbringing, that we kind of knew that, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean we should, and that came to everything from, where we should go to school to, after high school versus, like, oh, like this is the clothing item of the year. Like, should we buy it or not? Like, I don't know, I think it really kind of helped both my brother and I to kind of stay true to who we are and not conform based off a certain idea or, what other people were doing.
Is your brother older than you or younger than you?
He's older than me.
Oh, okay, so about like how many years?
He's about 4 years older than me.
Okay, so it's a fairly well, somewhat. I mean, it's like your typical sort of older brother. My sister's older than me as well. I think she's 3 years older than me. I can't. To be fair, I can't remember. I'm so bad with birthdays. Do you know what? I don't even know how old she is. She's 22. She's 23. I think she's 22, right? Which would basically mean she's 3 years older than me. I'm gonna assume she is. She don't watch this, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, so I mean, all right. So you kind of sort of went off the group or against the group, which is interesting to hear because obviously I'm from the UK, And we often see sort of American TV shows and American films, and you see sort of American schools, and you immediately see the difference, the way our schools. Oh, and I understand, TV shows probably emphasize loads of different areas. I want to know what it's like in America. Actually, first, I want to know because you've mentioned kindergarten, high school, college, and we use completely different words, right? So we start off like nursery when you're like, I think, how old are you? I don't even know it myself. I think you're like 5 or 4 or something like that. And then you go into primary school, which is 6. This is my experience. So you go into primary school, which is like 6 till 12, I think. And then you go into high school, which is 13 to 16. And then you go into sixth form or college, you can call it either. And that is 16 to 18. And then you go to university, which is whenever you want, after 18. What's it like in America?
Yeah, so in terms of just like the education, so most kids, or at least my upbringing was, you started out in preschool, which is kind of like the nursery level. So like I think that's usually like ages like 3 to 5, maybe 6, just depending. But preschool is usually about 2 to 3 years, and then you would go into kindergarten. So kindergarten's like when you're 6-ish. And then you would have your elementary school years. So your elementary school years were usually one. I had 2 elementary schools, but usually elementary is like 1st grade through 5th grade. And then you have like your middle school, which is, again, more than likely 6th grade to 8th grade. And then my school was then just had a high school, which was 9th grade through 12th grade. So freshman to senior year. Some schools, some had like a senior high that was just only for 11th and 12th graders, which was kind of weird. But so yeah, like that's kind of the process. And then obviously once you graduate high school, you can then go to, a university. You can go, and that's obviously, can be 4 years, 3 years, depending on your program. And then obviously you can work your way up to like doing, you can get like an associate's, bachelor's, master's, PhD, graduate level. But yeah, that was kind of the traditional education format that I had. But I obviously for me, I stopped after my 4 years at university, at least for now. We'll see.
I mean, why not? I mean, I've always said, I mean, I don't want to do the work for it, but I've always said if I could get Dr. Tariq Ahmed on a letter, I'd be the happiest person in the world. It just looks. I imagine, like, I'd tell everyone it's no longer Mr. Ahmed, it's Dr. Ahmed. You have to refer to me as Doctor. It's just cool. It's different. And yeah, no, I'd love it, and I don't see why not. So, I mean, the American. I mean, I know we're talking about American schools a lot, and sort of, yeah, I'm just really interested in it as someone from the UK. And to be fair, I think a lot of people from the UK are interested in it because Americans have got so many things. Like you use words like freshman. And the other one, I can't even remember what it was, and all these different words that Americans use for schools. And again, I don't know why, I just find it fascinating because we just don't use them. And like graduating, the only time you ever graduate is from university. You don't graduate high school, you don't graduate primary school, nothing like that. But in America, it seems like you graduate high school and then you graduate this, and it's I don't know, everything gets celebrated, which I absolutely love. I think it's brilliant. I did have actually another question about American school. I mean, what would you say that the way they're depicted in school, in movies and TV shows, is that roughly how it is, or would you say they're very much exaggerated?
Ooh, I think for the most part, I think if you were to strip down the bare bones, I think like the true essence of it, yes. But I do think a lot of certain aspects of it are kind of blown out of proportion a little bit. However, though, like I think some things that like aren't blown out of proportion, that are definitely portrayed, I think fairly well, is like, like, I mean, I don't know, I mean, this has to be the case, I think, regardless where you are globally, but I mean, like, you know, bullying is a huge, like, obviously, like, is a huge thing that I know is portrayed in movies and stuff like that. Like, that is very prevalent, like, regardless of, you know, where you're from. Like, I think like situations like that, like bullying or anything related to, you know, sports drama, you know, rivalries, I think that's always played out very well. You know, but yeah, I mean, there are those movies though that again are like kind of are like really like that's not the typical like high school. Like I guess a really good example that again pops into my mind, but like Mean Girls. Like that, you know, that definitely the whole high school experience is a little drawn out, I think, a little bit. But yeah, I mean, overall, like I think, yeah, if you were just to take the essence, you know, what it looks like, you know, kind of the day to day, I think overall, like TV shows, you know, movies, they do, I think, a good job, both high school and college, I think, too, at least kind of portraying the bare bones of it. But yeah, there always is the drama aspect to any of that stuff.
Mm. See, I feel like they should definitely do something because I would love to have gone to, even if it was just for a year, to have gone to American high school. I feel like they should do something where you they get students for a full year, you come out, so you do a UK and US swap. So you go into the other school. I don't know how it would work in terms of, again, like you mentioned, bullying and stuff like that and how that would be. But I think it would just be so good and it would have such, I think it'd have a positive impact on the people that do get to go because you get to experience this whole new life. Almost like like a foreign exchange. But you know, maybe a little bit different. I don't know. It'll be very expensive. I don't know how people would fund it, but it would just. I'd love to have gone to.
I would love it too. I would definitely do it.
I think we should do it. Like I'll be you, I'll be Nicole, you can be Tarek. We'll do a quick swap. It'll be fun. I'll live in Pittsburgh. It sounds like it's pretty amazing, and then you can do university again if you want.
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
I love school, so it's fine.
See, exactly. I mean, you'd have to do history and international relations, but there's a lot of writing in that. So happy days, you know. Perfect. And I saw that you've done a few speaking events. I love speaking. You know what? We need to make this happen.
I know.
This is brilliant. This is a brilliant idea. I mean, like, let's get back sort of on to sort of your life because we just went on a. I just was just interested in America. I want to ask about sort of was your dad's diagnosis before you went to JCU or after?
My dad's diagnosis was actually when I was a freshman in high school. So that was like 9th grade. And yeah, then my mom's actually diagnosis came my senior year at John Carroll. So there was about a good like 7 or 8 years apart between the two.
Okay, so I want to talk about your dad's diagnosis. How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so kind of like over winter break. So he was actually diagnosed in January of 2012. So like over like the Christmas holiday, he noticed that he was kind of having like difficulty like breathing through his nose, just for whatever reason. So he went to a couple like specialist doctors, like got it all checked out, and nothing like showed up that was like wrong. However, though, there was one doctor, it was like kind of like the 3rd or 4th appointment that he had, noticed something else, like kind of more near, because he had a tumor basically, and it was kind of like up his nasal passage, kind of in between his eyebrows and eyes, and then on his frontal lobe of his brain. So that's where it was located. But they noticed, like, I guess one of the scans or tests that he had, they noticed something, and the doctor kind of just said, hey, like, I think you should get an MRI just to be sure, like let's make sure everything's good. And thank God they did, because the MRI did reveal that he had a tumor. And that's when they diagnosed it as, well, it has to be this, O-factor neuroblastoma. And I actually found out about it, or my parents kind of told me the news on my dad's birthday, which was kind of not the best timing, I will admit. But they kind of, you know, told me kind of basically the situation that like, this is what it is, but also like, we have no idea what's to come. And, you know, being only 15 years old at the time, and my brother was away at university. So he didn't really have to deal with as much the baggage as, what at least my parents and I had to deal with. But, I talk about that day and like the first initial weeks of like just dealing with that news. And it was, definitely was hard to swallow, but yet I'll never forget though, when I found out about the news, my dad was very composed, to be honest. I think that's the one thing I must admire about my father is like, I've only seen him like cry like 2 or 3 times, but like, during the entire time of his diagnosis and recovery, like he just had so much composure and so much strength and resiliency. And it's something that is like, I definitely like have tried to model, in certain situations. But I remember my dad just being so calm and just asking me to promise him that, I would continue to, do well at school, especially both academically and also my sports and activities. And also just make sure that like, I kind of stay with him through this until the end, and I think like, no, I think that was just really remarkable about, I think, as I wrote my book and kind of reflected on my life, like it's weird. Like, I mean, I believe me, I had my fair share of crying and I had my fair share of like those like gut wrenching, like bottom of the valley moments, but they didn't last long. Like that's like, like what you talked about earlier, like sadness is very temporary. And I did not like to be kind of in that position. I definitely, worked towards throughout all my life and during those moments with my dad. Like I tried to find the light at the end of the tunnel and find that you realize that, okay, yes, this is a major derailment on our journey, but yet there's got to be greater and better things ahead. And this might be teaching me something that has yet to come. And that's what I realized is, this moment with my dad and over the years, like it actually has led me, I think has indirectly led me to John Carey University. It's led me to my passion in HR. And also it allowed me to kind of like pursue kind of my passion for writing, obviously. So I think that was, I think that's been kind of, to be honest, I'm still kind of shocked about it. But that's one thing that I find so remarkable about dealing with my dad's diagnosis was, you're right, like the sadness was very temporary, but the positive implications that resulted afterwards are still multiplying to this day.
What are some of those positive aspects?
Well, I think probably, some just very obvious ones that come out of any traumatic experience one can face. But like, to be honest, like, I always thought my family would be close, but we just grew closer together. We just had our relationship strengthened. The trust and the love that we have became more unconditional. I found so much, I guess like another good thing is I found so much appreciation and gratitude for the little things. Whether that was just being able to like live another day or like being able to like have a laugh or two, like, and you smile like this, despite having a crazy day. Just being able to express and have more gratitude for things. I definitely think it's kind of had a lot of direct implications on how successful I was in school, especially because that's what my dad, I kind of held my promise to my dad very tightly that I would do well in school, and that's what I did. Got top of my class at my university, graduated top of my class in high school. Like that's kind of just, I put my heart and soul into kind of my academics and education, and I think that's why HR has become such a passion for me. It's not just a money maker for me or, helps me get by day to day. It's actually a passion that I'm proud to pursue. And I think it also has led me to, I think it's just more of a reason too, why it's allowed me to love Pittsburgh and not want me to leave Pittsburgh as well. So I mean, there's so many, I could like keep going on forever and ramble on and on about how much, but those are just some of the key ways that I think it just automatically, just instantaneously, those are just some of the positive things that emerged.
I think, the song goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that's definitely true. Like all the hardship in life, whether you directly go through it or whether you sort of, someone else that you're close to goes through it, always has not necessarily a positive outcome, but it can definitely have some positive, aspects coming out of it. When I was younger, my mum passed away from cancer. It was a long time ago. I was very young, so I never sort of got the negative impacts of it. Like I was quite protected from it, I would say, even though I understood what was going on. I was too young to sort of properly understand it. But when I meet relatives, particularly on her side with family, they're always like, "Oh, your mum was this, and we feel so sorry for you, etc., etc." And I've always said, don't feel sorry for me, because I have an external motivation now, to make her proud. I also have learned things. I've become a lot more independent, and there's so many different aspects of my life that wouldn't have happened. Me going away from university, potentially that might not have happened. So many different things I just think wouldn't have come about, if she was still alive. So that's my mindset to it. And I obviously have it easier because, like I said, I didn't have. I was so young at the time. I was like 7, 8 years old. I understood it a little bit, but I didn't understand it so much that I got the negative implications from it. And I definitely agree with what you said about there being some positive impacts of it. What's the situation now with your dad then? Is he still around, or?
Yes, I was gonna say my dad's doing great. He's still around. We're still dealing with a lot of like the long-term effects of it. But overall though, yes, I mean, both my parents are both doing well, and have recovered cancer-free, the whole shebang.
Brilliant. So you sort of mentioned in the beginning your dad's the longest survivor of the cancer.
He is believed to be, yes, because there's only been maybe just a dozen or so of these cases. And even to this day, I mean, that he was diagnosed 9 years ago with this. And, I remember when I was trying to share a little more information in my book and just kind of sharing some research on it, nothing's changed in the last 9 years. It's still very like unknown. And there's not much, even the actual procedure and the process that my dad went through, which was very like kind of spontaneous. It's what they consider to be the standard now. So I think, and that's kind of a very unique, because it does seem like in a way, like my dad was a trailblazer, was kind of the, kind of set up the process for all this. But then again, it is a shame, because it's like, it definitely is a very unique cancer, because it was kind of like a brain tumor, but also related to like, the nasal passage, and even the consequences that happen afterward obviously are very unique too. Like, for example, like because the tumor was on the frontal lobe of his brain, when they removed the cancer, although they were very, very like careful, and it was a 16-hour surgery because of how difficult it was, the part of the membrane of the brain was partly removed. And so like my dad lost his entire sense of smell. Like he can't smell anything.
Wow.
And he also lost a lot of, kind of partly through the surgery, but also through radiation, his treatments, because he had radiation every day for 2 straight months. Like he lost a lot of his taste buds. So like there's certain food that he even can't like enjoy or eat. And that affects like a lot of his day to day too. So I think like it's just, yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the interesting side of it. And again, like he goes and still has regular checkups with the doctor and the surgeon that performed the surgery. But yeah, it is kind of bittersweet in a way that that although nothing's changed, at least my dad was able to be kind of like a precedent, and kind of be able to be this kind of role model for this particular cancer.
That's mental. That I suppose the smell thing. So he can't smell anything at all.
No, he cannot. Yeah, he can't smell anything. And that doesn't seem to impact him as much, to be honest. Like, I mean, it initially was weird at first. But I think it's more like the actual like the taste buds that I think is still kind of like bothers him a lot. Like, for example, like because he lost like a lot of his taste buds and like his ability to generate saliva. So like, he can't have like for example, any like heavy alcohol, like, other than maybe like a light, like little like champagne or like a light wine, like anything super heavy, he can't have. Like anything really dry, he can't have. Anything like soup, anything remotely spicy, even if it's just like a pepper, like it like literally hurts him. And like even like he's also very picky on the types of meat that he can have. Like he can't have beef. Like he basically just eats a lot of chicken, and it's like kind of chopped up really finely and tiny because he can't swallow too well either. So, I mean, it's definitely been a challenge and he still struggles with it, but yeah, the smelling at least has not been as, it's ironic, but I think the smelling doesn't seem to impact him as much. Other than occasionally he like, will walk into like a bakery or something, or like he'll even like try and like, he'll even like when we go somewhere that would smell amazing, like a bakery or a restaurant, like he'll even turn to me and ask, he's like, can you describe to me like what it smells like?
Oh,
And like I will. Yeah, like I know a couple times he will do that, like when we go on vacation or stuff like that. But yeah, overall though, it definitely seems like kind of the eating side is the part that seems to impact him the most.
yeah. See, because in my opinion, there's nothing better than the smell of a bakery, right? When something's
Right.
being baked, right, something sweet or bread or whatever, there's just nothing better. And so the fact that you can't smell it is I mean, obviously, it could be worse, the long-term effects, and like you said, it hasn't had a huge impact on him. But I think again, a sort of positive one on you and your family from that is you'd start appreciating smell a lot more. If I had to start describing to someone what something smelled like, I'd be like, bloody hell, I'm so lucky that I can actually smell. Even now, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, imagine if tomorrow I just couldn't smell, like all the
Mhm.
good food, chocolate. Like I'm obsessed with chocolate. If I couldn't smell chocolate, I don't know what I'd do. If I'd lost my taste buds and not being able to, oh no, I just couldn't. So it's
Yeah.
definitely sort of, it's making me more grateful now. So I'm sure for you, it would have made you a lot more grateful about it all. Um, yeah, no, I bet it did. But I mean, so you'd gone through that, and it was a rare cancer, and it seems like your dad's defeated the odds, and obviously for your family, you would have been like, we beat the odds. And then I mean, it feels like you've truly been dealt with a bad hand because, like you said, your mum got cancer. What was that like?
When my mom got cancer, yeah, it was kind of a similar yet very different experience. And I think mostly just because, well, first of all, my mom's cancer was a little bit more known, still rare, but known. She had like ovarian cancer. So in terms of kind of like what the expectations were, like the process, like that was a little more laid out, very crisp, a little more crisp and clear, which was great. But it was still a very different experience, mostly just because like, you know, my dad had 16-hour surgery. He had like over a year-long recovery. He also had radiation. Where my mom, I mean, her surgery ended up being, I think, 4 hours or something like that. But then she had chemo and kind of went through like a different process with that. So it was very distinct, two different cancer journeys. But to be honest, I think partly I wasn't as involved in my mom's her diagnosis as much, mostly because I was at John Carroll. So it's like I think the day she had her surgery, like I was having finals. So like I couldn't even go home and like be there for the surgery. And then she actually recovered, just she had enough strength and recovered from her surgery to be able to go to my graduation. So kind of like the timing of it all was, I wasn't as in like a there or immersed into it as much as my dad's, which is neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of the timing of things. But in a weird way, it was definitely a little bit easier to kind of go about my mom's, I think, just because I knew what kind of to expect. I kind of could see myself kind of going down that rabbit hole of negativity, but then I caught myself early on. But it's, I think also what was hard about my mom's diagnosis too, or the timing that she went through, her surgery and stuff like that. To be honest, I was dealing with my own struggles. I was kind of dealing with my own anxiety and PTSD and just kind of depression. So I kind of was all honestly a little bit more focused on kind of what was going on internally with me, that it just was kind of two major forces just kind of colliding together. So in a weird way, it was easier, but at the same time, it wasn't, because I kind of wish it, like deep down, like I could have given her more undivided attention, but because of just me finishing up my college career and trying to enjoy it, but also trying to take care of my own self, it was definitely challenging in its own way.
I think, and I'm trying to look at it. I know for you, it's like you can only, in that situation, you can kind of only see your own perspective because you were in that situation. I think from the perspective of your mum and your dad, even, I think in many ways they probably would have been glad that you weren't directly in this involved in the situation, and you had that role similar to the role that your brother had when your dad had his diagnosis, that you were out of the situation, you were thinking about something else. And I think for them it would have been easier as well, because I know you mentioned earlier that your dad was, quite strong during his whole process, and I think part of that would have been because he would have felt like he had to be strong for you because you were still very young. And I think that the fact that you weren't there for your mums, it probably would have allowed your mum to show a bit more information, not have the potential stress of being like, well, I have to show strength for my daughter because I don't want her to be worrying too much. So, I mean, I guess potentially it might have been sort of a really good thing that you weren't there and you were, focused more on exam, and you ended up doing very well. Again, you and your family seem to have defeated the odds once again. Not only did your mum beat cancer, and your mum is glad, thankfully, cancer free, you also graduated top of your class, I believe, which I mean is an incredible achievement, especially given the situation that you were in as well. You mentioned there PTSD as well. Could you tell us a bit more about that and your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, how I kind of came, the diagnosis that kind of I got with my anxiety and PTSD came about actually like the first semester, or kind of like the fall of my senior year of college. That's kind of when like I was wrapping up a lot of like my leadership roles that I was involved in so heavily. I was kind of winding down on my classes. I didn't have like a full like course schedule. It was kind of very more relaxed. And I went from kind of, because like I talked about, like at high school, I was so heavily involved. I was so intrinsically motivated by academics that, for 8 years, I was so driven and had this motivation for life. And then kind of in a blink of an eye, in like a week or two's time, everything kind of just naturally, just because of the timing of things and transitions, it just kind of all fell away. And I just felt and I kind of got to the point where like I was driving myself insane over the boredom that I had. And I felt like I had no purpose. And I started to get very anxious and scared of the future and like what it would hold for me. And it got to the point where like I actually had like a full-blown panic attack. And it got to the point where I actually ended up like going to the emergency room because it was so bad. And after kind of like talking to several doctors, kind of sharing like my past, and they actually did diagnose it not only like as a panic attack, but they even said like, yeah, like you do have on-site symptoms of depression, and you also do have PTSD. And I think the reason why with the PTSD, it's that one truly made sense to me. I think more in the sense that like, I've always had, this goal to write a book, and I always one day told myself that I would finally tell the story about what happened, like the last 8-10 years of my life. But it was just kind of like a dream that I put on the back burner for a really long time. And, I still felt throughout even college, I still felt burdened by what happened, even though obviously we emerged victoriously. And again, a lot of positive things emerged from it. I still didn't process it or reflect on it in a healthy way. I didn't have the opportunity to finally let go of it, or release the burden that's been like pulling at my heart, or I've been carrying on my shoulders for so long. And the only way I've been able to in a healthy way do that is through writing. And I just kind of pushed that away for a very long time throughout my high school career and college. And I think I got to a breaking point where if I don't address this, if I even just for my own self, even if I don't publish it, if I don't address the situation now and like be able to kind of reflect on it and process and put all the pieces together, I'm just going to keep falling down this rabbit hole. So I finally kind of came to this decision, and for my senior year, although I ended it on a positive note and on a very high note, a lot of my time, my last semester, my senior year was spent very much just me alone. where, I kind of kept to myself a lot. I didn't engage in as much social activities. And I just kind of really was just dealing with my anxiety, my depression, and also trying to find a positive outlet to kind of process everything that happened to me. And I did. And it got to the, and that's obviously kind of how, by sharing my story and being comfortable with it, that's kind of how it led me to kind of finally decide I want to publish it. But yeah, I definitely was, I do just remember when I received that diagnosis, it was kind of like, it wasn't as a shock to me as I thought, but I just never thought that I would have that label. You know what I mean? But again, I mean, I've been able to work through it. I've been able to, even to this day, find so many ways to kind of process it and have found, even just through my own book and sharing my story, how, being able to share my story and be vulnerable with it has helped more people than I could ever have imagined.
It's mental that you say all that. One of the best things about this podcast is I get to speak to people from all over the world. So people from Pittsburgh, like yourself, people from different backgrounds and whatever. And one of the best moments of any single podcast episode is I somehow manage to relate with someone, someone that I would have never thought I would have related with, someone from, completely across the pond. And that part there, I completely related with. My whole life, I've been someone that, has always been academically motivated, always has worked hard, isn't naturally smart, but has always worked hard to be the best that I can possibly be. And even though I haven't been top, I've never sort of been top of my class in any situation. I've always gone for every single leadership role, every single, sort of activity role, always tried to be as confident as possible. And then it was actually in, the winter time that I just went, around November, December time, where I just noticed that motivation had all of a sudden gone. And I started questioning myself and going, maybe I've never actually truly been motivated, and I was just doing those things for a bit, and now I'm not a motivated person. And I was quite, and you talked about boredom. The boredom of lockdown was getting to me as well. I didn't have opportunities to do anything, and I didn't even have opportunities to go for those leadership positions because there were no leadership positions because there was nothing to do in lockdown. And so everything started to feel like it was just slowly falling apart. Again, you mentioned depression as well. At that point, I was thinking, am I depressed? And it was weird because I never thought I'd get that label either. Just like you, I never thought I would have that label. I've always tried to be, especially in the last sort of year or so, I was trying as much as possible to be as positive as possible. I never thought I'd have that label. I mean, it turned out that I also had COVID at the time, and I realized that almost, I don't know if that actually played a part in it, but I sort of told myself when I had COVID, oh, it must be COVID. And then after I felt better, I sort of tried to get back into a mental positive frame of things. So maybe it was COVID, maybe it wasn't. But I related to that so much because so many elements of that, of being this really academically, and I feel like a lot of people listening will relate to this as well, being academically motivated, but then something happens, something out of your control happens, and it slowly sort of gets into your head a little. And the other things that you've not been able to do for so long, or you have been able to do for so long, but you're no longer able to do now, you can't do for whatever reason, whether it's lockdown, whether it's your final year at university and you've got to drop these things, whatever, you can't do them. They mentally start having a toll on your mind. And I don't know what it is. And you don't want to accept the depression label either. And we're in a sort of society where now you don't want to say you're depressed because you don't want to seem like you're someone that's just saying you're depressed for the attention. But then equally, you don't want to not say you're depressed because that could really be bad on your own mental health. And so you're in this sort of crazy vicious cycle of things where you don't know what you want to do or you don't know what to do. And you mentioned there where you spent a lot of time on your own and you start getting into your book and stuff. I did the exact same thing, and rather than starting a book, I started a podcast. And it's weird because it's the best decision I've probably made in God. I don't know a decision I made better than that, because even though this podcast isn't big, it gets a few people watching it. It's probably 5 people watching it right now. Hopefully people, your followers watch it as well. So we get 10 people watching it, which would be amazing. But I don't even know what I was saying. But I just love doing it. And like you wrote a book and you ended up seeing your grandma happy about it as well, which I'm sure even if that book didn't sell anything, just seeing your grandma happy with it must have made it 100% worth it.
Oh yeah. It's again, yeah, it's just, that's where it kind of just goes back to like, you just have to kind of, in a weird way sometimes, like you said, you get caught up in the moment and you get up all mentally into your mind, and you can just kind of see it spiraling. But sometimes you do in your own life really have to take that step back, like a zoomed out perspective on your own life, like a bird's eye view, and just kind of look at it and realize, like even like just a COVID situation, like you think about, oh, I'm stuck in quarantine. Oh, like, I can't see my friends. Like you kind of do, start to kind of, pull the poor me pity card. But then it's like when you take that step back, you realize, well, first of all, there are millions and millions of people in the same position. And also you have to take a step back. And like, at least for me, I was very fortunate that like, I didn't have anyone that, has unfortunately passed away from like the virus and stuff like that. Like I've known a few people that had COVID, but like have been able to recover from it. But I've just been very blessed, but at least no one, like at least in my family or my immediate friends, have been impacted by it. And sometimes you just have to like really take that perspective and just kind of, it's hard sometimes because, we're all so intrinsically inward focused on ourselves. We're all selfish beings, like that's who we are. But it does help though, especially, with some really intense topics like, whether it's dealing with midst of a pandemic or dealing with, just kind of struggling with like just the standard norms of like what it's like to go to university and stuff like that. Like you have to kind of realize that it's not just you alone. It's, it's your own journey, it's your own life, but like there's other people walking alongside you. And that just kind of helps to make the process a little bit maybe more comforting, but it also maybe just opens your eyes to see that, that there's, you can learn so much from other people. And that you can also be able to find opportunities to lean onto those people to kind of get through those moments, learn from them, and also kind of find, the positives as well.
But I know before we touch on sort of your passion for for HR, would you say that's what sort of your book is about? Is about seeing perspective and understanding that there is that objective view that you can have that will help you realize it?
I would say, if I was to summarize my book in like a sentence or two, I think my book's really about, it really just takes the readers on this journey about how, we can, view our challenges. Doesn't, anywhere from, being diagnosed with, a rare cancer or, an illness to maybe even growing up in like a very like abusive household. Doesn't matter what type of challenge, but recognizing that our challenges, life is meant to be challenging, and we need to kind of bring light to these chapters in our life because they not only teach us very important lessons such as how to be grateful, how to be resilient, but they also allow us to kind of continuously grow and evolve ourselves, which kind of opens these doors to us. It leads us to our passions. It leads us to our profession and our purpose. And, in my book, obviously, it's mostly my story, but I have about 20 other individuals in my book who have gone similar yet very distinct journeys. And they've kind of seen the same thing where, they learn these same lessons. And, because they, had open heart surgery, because of what they learned through their open heart surgery, they were able to find their calling through faith and community. Or, someone that, kind of experienced a very intense peer pressure because they were the only girl that majored in this particular, academic space. They were able to break a lot of barriers, kind of on a gender norm, and kind of set a standard and be a role model for others. So it's just very interesting. But yeah, I really just kind of want people to really understand that, trials or triumphs in our life, they should be viewed as transformative opportunities rather than traumatic. So yeah, I really just hope my book can bring light to this kind of type of topic.
I love that last line, that trials are, I forgot it now, transformative. What was it again? Say it again.
I was gonna say, oh my gosh, like I probably can't even repeat it, but like just recognizing that the trials and the triumphs of our life, should be viewed as transformative rather than traumatic.
That's
A
it.
lot of T's, I know. I love alliteration, so that's
Yeah,
one
no,
thing you should
same.
know about.
It's impactful when you have alliterations or use like I mean, you're probably the expert. You like English. Um, but yeah, no, that was a brilliant line. I'm definitely going to use that. Um, so I mean, from your book, obviously you wrote it, and you've had the sort of pleasure of doing many different speaking events. Well, at least that's what I've sort of found. What have you sort of realized from after writing the book? Like what have been some post writing realizations, I guess.
Yeah,
That was
I
an
think
alliteration as well. Do you see that? Post writing realizations. See?
I love that. I was
No, I
gonna
was
say,
gonna
I
say.
definitely want to use that too. I would say, oh gosh, for me, I think through post-writing journey as well as also through my speaking events, I think one has been definitely like I've learned so much about myself, through this writing experience. And I think one thing I realized is I think just the type of impact words can have and stories can have on certain individuals, even those like you least expect. And what I found through opening up, like sharing my stories, it really actually does give the spark for people to kind of open up and share about what's going on in their life. I had a teacher, who she was actually a teacher from my high school who bought my book, and she read it, and she shared with me kind of, what it was like, from her perspective, learning about, what was going on with my family. And she even kind of, I never knew about this, but she even shared some deep stuff about her own life, how she unexpectedly lost her only son, like traumatically. And she kind of said that this book really kind of brought to light some of those, or kind of rekindle kind of some of those defining moments that she had. And I've had even when I spoke at a couple universities, I've had students come up to me or email me kind of wanting to have some like one-off coffee chats and wanting to kind of have someone listen and have kind of a validation of what they're feeling was normal. Like, what they experience is something to not be ashamed of. It's, something that we can learn from. It's something that we can use to rekindle our spark and kind of, move, forward beyond life's moments. And I've just found that I think that's just been probably one of the most eye-opening things. Is just, I never thought I would be called an inspiration, but I've been called it more often now than I ever imagined. I just wanted to write this book to finally tell my story, to, be something kind of, to share with my family and friends, but it's kind of transcended beyond that. And the fact that I've been called an inspiration, a hero, kind of people look up to me now as like a role model. It's just amazing just how just a simple story and just having the courage to be vulnerable has just led to all this. And I think it's a testimony and living and kind of a living proof to me that, there might be some more writing in my future. There actually might be potentially another book. We'll see. But it definitely kind of validates to me that my writing kind of has this ability to really impact people in a very moving way. And I want to be able to continue that as long as I can. And that's why I think I want to continue it as a side hustle, a side passion, in addition to like my love for HR.
I think you definitely should. I mean, it seems like the people want another book, especially if they're regarding you as a hero and an inspiration from it. I'll leave the link for the Amazon link to the book in the description. It seems like the people want it. I think you should give it to them, and I definitely do think you have a very, very interesting story to tell, of a lot of triumphs, and using those as I still haven't got the quote right, as using those as transformative, I guess. But I mean, we've not got much time. I want to ask you my final question. The final question I ask to all my guests is, what advice would you give to someone who's 19, 20 years old, doesn't know what they want to do with their life right now?
My biggest piece of advice would be, probably just recognizing that, you know, your journey is truly unique. Your, story, everything that's happened to you, past, present, and what's yet to come is yours. And recognizing that, definitely life is full of challenges, but there's also more to celebrate too. And I think especially kind of people in that age group should not be afraid ever to, tell their story, to talk about their life, because to be honest, you'll never know who will benefit from your life moments. And sometimes, like, you'll gain new relationships, you'll strengthen some, an opportunity might open up for you, but sometimes too, like, at the end of the day, like, you actually might be the one that needs to hear your own story the most, in a way that can be very reflective and allow you to kind of see, wow, like, I've transformed, I've grown as an individual, like, I've learned from this, and, I'm ready to take on the next chapter of my life. I think just kind of recognizing that and being able to kind of, not only, cherish what's yet to come, but love the story that you've had so far. I think that would be my biggest
And
piece of
that
advice.
is it for this week's episode. I do hope you enjoyed it. I'll leave the link to Nicole's book in the description. It was an absolute pleasure to sit with Nicole. An interview style podcast, but also a bit more casual, which was obviously great. If you did enjoy it, then make sure you hit that like button, stay subscribed so you don't miss next week's episode. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great week. Until next time.